I'm going to take my mask off so people can see my face. It's Meg and Ann at Huff Harrington, and today we are so excited to welcome New York Times bestselling author Karen White. She's here today. She's going to be talking about her new book, Last Night in London, and we're so excited to have her here. We found out we have so many things in common, and we're just going to sit for a few minutes and chit-chat with Karen and talk about her book and what makes her tick, and we found a couple really fun commonalities that will be fun to talk about. So congratulations on the book. Why don't you fill us in a little bit and tell us about it?
Thank you, Meg. Thanks for having me. And really, it's really hard for me to sit still and chat because I really want to go shopping. So this is the book that I say is my most personal book yet. I have, I think we decided this is my 29th. Let's just say it's my 29th, something like that. And even though I lived in London for 7 years, I had never written a book set in London. All of my books are set in the South. That's where my family is from. But there was something that happened to me when I moved into our flat in London, when the porter explained to us that the reason why so many of the leaded glass windows were missing and had been replaced with plain glass was because during the Blitz, they had been shattered by nearby bombs. And I remember that even as a young woman, a girl and a young woman, lying in bed at night, just imagining the lives of the people that lived there. And I wasn't a writer then. I had absolutely no plans of being a writer. As a matter of fact, I didn't like being a writer. The only thing I actually did write at the time, besides school assignments, was I kept a small journal to record what I wore to school each day, so I'd never repeat an outfit. But that never left me. And another thing that never left me was, my mother is from southern Mississippi, and I remember, since I've started writing, I write a lot of fish out of water stories. And my mother, God bless her, with her thick southern accent from the Mississippi Delta, went to London, and I remember people making fun of her accent. And I just, for her to try to move her southern self to this huge city, what a struggle, and how interesting that must have been for her. And so I wanted to tell that kind of a story about an American expatriate, especially with a Southern character. So I actually have two Southern characters in this book. And then I have, two older books, Falling Home and After the Rain, and there was a character who was a young girl at the time in both of them. Very Southern books set in Southern Georgia. And I've had readers ask me, whatever happened to Maddie Warner? So I thought, this could be her book. She's from the South. Let's put her in London. And then another book that came out last year, a collaboration, that is set at the Paris Ritz.
Oh, yeah. I loved that book. It was so good.
It was very
All
popular. Yes,
with fabulous
with
book.
Beatrice William and Lauren Willig, and there's a character there, Precious Dubose. We meet her, it's 1964, and she alludes to sort of a mysterious past during the war, which at that time would have been 20 years before. So of course I had to put Precious Dubose. She is turning 100, and she wants to tell her story. She's donated all of her beautiful clothes, her couture clothes that she modeled during the heyday of her modeling career, to the London Fashion Museum, which is really a place and a thing. And Maddie has been hired to interview this real model from the time about what it was like being about fashion in a time of crisis. And of course, as you start talking, to anybody, and you start peeling back the layers, you realize that there is really much more of a story than just that. And so they both kind of start peeling back the layers of each of their pasts and their secrets, and takes place in London, and I mean, wow, right?
Oh, wow. Well, I can't wait to read it. And one of the things I thought was so interesting when we put this on the calendar and we were reading about you is that all three of us have this weird connection in that we lived in different countries, and,
yes.
and what a huge influence and what an impact that has on you as a young adult or an adult. It really gives you an insight to the way that other cultures live, and having that history up close and personal living in Europe, where you will go by monuments and statues and you'll see walls with bullet holes in them, or as an American college student hitchhiking my way through Normandy, farmers stopping to pick me up and hugging me and kissing me because I was American. And you had the same thing. Oh, tell about your father.
Well, no. What about the fact that he liberated a
Liberated
cat?
a village.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
Wow.
no, yeah, he came in through Italy, and so we've sort of traced his steps and landed in France, and yeah, I think it was all very accidental that this happened, but it is a really nice story.
Fascinating.
But the French love to hear these stories, and so it
Yes.
is fun. We have this in common when we go back, and we go back a lot to France and somewhat to England.
Right.
Not enough to England.
Not enough to
oh
England,
my gosh!
no, I
Have
know.
you been back since? And
I have, and we brought our kids, and it has changed quite a bit because I was there in the 80s. But you know what? It's still my hometown. Because with my father's job, we moved around so much, I never really had a hometown. So that was before I moved to Georgia. That was the longest I'd ever lived anywhere, and that was 7 years.
Wow.
But I would get, like, my husband would say, okay, so let's do this today. I'm like, okay, great. So we'll just need to go to the Baker Street tube station, and then we'll get on, we'll get on the Jubilee line and go 3. Like, it's still in my head all these years ago. And then when I'm seeing, watching the weddings, the royal weddings now, and I remember being in Hyde Park to watch the fireworks when Diana and Charles got married, and it just seems like a brief period of time. And I remember watching the Queen's Silver Jubilee in 1977. So going back to England, it really is like going back to my hometown, and I just will always have this wonderful soft spot for London. I would love to go, and I tell my husband, I'm like, I can work anywhere.
Yeah.
And he's like, yes, Karen, but I can't. I'm like, you don't have to tell them.
Right.
But I would love to. It was really, and you're talking about monuments. The building across the street from Harley House, which is where we lived, there's a big plaque that said, on this site was the house where Charles Dickens lived while writing David Copperfield.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that is your...
That's history, history in your face.
Exactly,
Yeah.
like you can't avoid it, and we just love, again, love history, absolutely love history. And I allude to this a little bit in some of the essays that I've been writing, but I was an American teenager at the time, and I spent much of my time there grousing about, well, I'm the only American teenager who will not get her driver's license because we didn't own a car. We were
Been there, done that.
and I remember
Been
my
there, done
parents
that.
looking at me like, you stupid girl. And right now I want to go back and like shake her, like, are you kidding me,
Well, I love how in your books you've got these very strong, independent female lead characters, and I loved reading that Nancy Drew was one of your role models.
Yes.
I swear in another life I was in the Resistance. I know
We probably both were.
Yes, I know I was.
Yeah.
Not high level.
Okay.
More like a courier, like
Sure.
a message hidden under the
Sure.
the leaks or something like that. Really not too high level, but I know I was.
I think I was a Serbian girl, and I was like, but I spoke German
You
for
spoke
some
German.
reason, so I could listen to them all. But yeah, so when I was in 3rd grade, we were living in Venezuela, lovely hot spot to live in, literally hot spot.
Yes.
And I remember, so we were all socially distanced here and vaccinated, but
Masks on.
masks on. I remember going into my first library because my mother wasn't a reader. She never took me to libraries or bookstores, and in Venezuela there really weren't any. But I followed my friend into, we lived in a compound with all the oil people and the American compound, and we went in and there was like a little store at the club that basically people, when they went back to the state, they would just leave off their books. And so I went in so my friend could pick out a book, and I just went in because it was air conditioned. And I remember Mrs. Sharrow, the librarian, turning to me and saying, so Karen, what do you like to read? Because I wasn't, looking at the books, and I said, I don't. And she was like, wait, you're 9 years old and you don't read. And my father was a reader, but all, nonfiction. And she turned around and she picked up a book, and it was The Secret of the Old Clock.
Ah, my favorite.
One of the best.
Yep.
And from then on, and what I love too, because I come from a family of all boys. I have 3 brothers, God help me. And, and I loved how Nancy took charge, and she was the boss. She, and I think that, and a lot of people, I do a mystery series set in Charleston, and they call that Nancy Drew for adults, and it's because I do have a strong female character. She's very flawed, like we all are, but I love those kinds of characters. I love writing about female characters who don't think they've got it in them to do what's needed to solve a problem or whatever. And you know, this book is the same way. We have two female leads who are doing the same thing. You know, they think they are broken and destroyed, and it's by getting together and sharing their stories that they realize that they are survivors, not just survivors, but heroes in many ways.
I love that. That's really inspiring. It really
Can't
is.
wait to read it.
Thank you.
Okay, we have to ask you a couple fluffy questions.
Okay, I'm good with fluff.
Fluffy questions. Okay, what's your favorite vacation spot?
Well, I have to say
And you can have more than one.
Close by, I have to say the Panhandle of Florida, because I do have a house there, and that's my whole family knows it's Karen's house, and if they want to go visit, they have to get permission, even my husband. And you know what? Geez. I have two favorites, other favorites that are outside the United States, and that would be Italy, especially Venice, and Ireland, the entire country. Okay, throw Scotland into that. Okay, England too.
Yeah, England in there.
And you know, it's great too because, you know, they all speak English, except for the Italians, but even they don't make you feel bad if you don't speak Italian.
Right.
Whereas in France, they do.
Oh!
But I have to say, my bucket list, I'm learning French because I got the greatest fake accent.
You do have a good French.
It's scary, right?
It's really good.
And those I think it's because I sung French madrigals. I'm very musical, and I sang in music groups my whole life, and I did a madrigal group for all 4 years in high school, and we always sang French, you know, madrigals. So maybe that's
How do you work at your house? Do you write as if it's a job? You know, it's 9 o'clock. I got to sit down and pound out a couple chapters. Break for lunch. Work till 5.
Now, when my kids were at home, it was easy to do that because I knew from this time to this time, I would. That would be my work time, and that's all I needed to do. And then the kids would come home, and if I had to take them to football or whatever, I'd sit in the car and write on my laptop. It was great. Then my kids left. And my parents they didn't move in, but they moved into my head. And they're much less predictable. Like, I never know when I have to go to the ER or when there's an issue. Because I pretty much take care of everything. And it's exhausting, and it's like my dad calls about 15 times a day to tell me, like this morning we were driving here, and he had to tell me like 4 more item numbers of jewelry that he's found on jewelry television. And I will write a book about this one day, but right now it's just really painful.
It's too close.
It's really painful. So yeah, my mother has Alzheimer's, my dad has dementia. So now it's just catch as catch can, and I do, sadly, I look at it more as a job, and I mean, the book that I'm writing right now, I'm in love with. I cannot wait to get to it. I'm going to tell you, it is the first book of a spin-off series that will follow the Trad Street series. The last book of that comes out this November, and people are like, you cannot finish. I'm like, their story needs to be done, but I think Nola, who is the daughter of the family, she needs to move to New Orleans, and I adore New Orleans.
Yes.
It has that French, you know, just the history of New Orleans and the architecture.
So you've written 2 books in 1 year? You've written 3 books in 2 years?
Well, this book was supposed to be out last year.
Okay.
But 2019 was when my parents happened. And so it was 8 months late turning it in. And my publisher, and everybody's very understanding, but you know, there's only so much you can do when you're at the emergency room every other week, you know. And so I'm glad it didn't come out in 2020. So the only book I had out last year was All the Ways We Say Goodbye.
Yeah.
And then we do have another one coming out. We're working on right now.
So exciting.
So this year, 2 books.
Great.
Which is this book and then the Trad Street book. And the next book will be 2 books again. It will be the next collaboration and the first book in the spin-off series. First one is called The Shop on Royal Street, and it's centered around an antique store on Royal Street in New Orleans.
Lovely. Wow.
So I have a question. You love historical figures, obviously, and there are a lot of wonderful ones who have passed away.
Yes.
And you probably like to eat and cook and all that too.
I don't like to cook. I love to eat.
Okay, so if you had some dinner party guests, who would they be?
I would love, and it doesn't have to be living or...
No.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it could be.
You know what? But Margaret Mitchell, because you know her book has gotten a lot of flack recently. But if you look into who she really was, and I believe she funded scholarships for African American students at a time when nobody was doing that. And she had, she was a woman, sitting in her apartment. She had a broken leg or something, and she just pulled out her typewriter and started typing this manuscript, and then gave the whole thing to a guy to put in a suitcase from Macmillan to take it up to New York. And I'm just like, I just want to know more about her personally. I would love to know how she responds to the criticism of her book now, because this is 2021, and we're beyond the civil rights. We still have issues, but from her perspective, from this book that she wrote to now, like how would she react? How would she respond to some of this? And tell us a little more about her.
I bet she would.
Yeah. She was a very intelligent woman and a fascinating woman, and it's sad she died way too young. But I would also, I'd met Pat Conroy a few times. He was hilarious. He was truly a warm individual, and I've read his the memoir that written by his wife, who I know and who is also equally as lovely. My Life with Pat Conroy, I believe is the title. But he was truly a remarkable individual and one of my favorite writers of all time.
I want to come to this dinner party.
Yeah, I know.
That sounds like fun.
I know. Yeah. And Harper Lee would be the third.
That'd be great. So this goes on sale April 20th.
Yes.
We're going to have signed copies here by Karen.
Right.
On sale April 20th.
Yes.
And we're so excited to launch this in this little corner of the world. And
well, I'm excited. I'll show you in a minute. We'll do a separate video to show me. I've already made purchases, but y'all need to come out and check out Huff Harrington on Roswell Road here in Atlanta. I'm so glad to meet these ladies. I appreciate you for hosting my book for sale, and I will also be giving away 4 $50 gift cards to Huff Harrington. But you have to come in and shop to get one.
thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
So
Thank
excited.
you both.
So excited. Come by and pick up your copy on